and the other issues related to the criminal procedure and like that. Could you start by giving us a little idea of how it is in Indonesia?
Yeah. I just read your few questions, yeah, on the basis of Pak Chris already mentioned to my WhatsApp, and there are several questions related to pre-trial detentions. First of all, it's like I apologize if not really. I'm not an expert, yeah, but Pak Chris actually the expert on this issue.
Yeah.
Instead of me.
So she can speak.
Okay. In general, actually, we have a serious problem or fundamental problems in especially criminal code as well as the procedural aspect of criminal procedure, especially looking at the not only the text or the document of law, but also how to enforce the law. Often that I look at the cases, it seems like a discriminatory process, especially if we see the cases like Papua or West Papua, or targeting criticism against the government. It seems like a very easy to bring the case without considering carefulness or appropriateness, and also without using professional process. And also in general, actually, not only the police but also for prosecutors, since many authorities in prosecutors to use criminal procedure mechanism has been influenced by the military process or military, what I call is military procedure in for instance, like investigating and so on. So that's not really civil supremacy, but it's more influenced by the past situations when the military quite dominant in the country. So that's in general, yeah. So I could say like that, especially during pandemic right now, since the military and police have stronger position in managing the pandemic. I found many cases actually quite abusive, especially targeting activism or criticism against the government. So that's few points in general.
So if you could explain to us more.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You can explain to us more on this.
Pardon me. It's
If he could explain to us more on this.
Related to which part? For instance, like in pandemic situation, actually just recently during pandemic situations, and I found that pre-trial detentions more influenced by the interest of regime. as I mentioned, that targeting criticism against the government. The case of Raffio Patra, for instance, without public pressure, without wider public attention at that time, Raffio Patra is a researcher, quite critical to the government, and also involved also uh, what is that, sort of like doing academic things, and he was targeted when his social media hijacked by anonymous for spreading fear by asking people to burn or making chaotic. Then the police, without considering that this case as part of hijacking his social media, um, he was brought by the police without proper communication, without considering fair trial, without inform clearly what happened actually the case and why he was not accompanied by his lawyer. And also, it seems like he was kidnapped by the police because friends could not contact him, although he was actually quite aware with the social media how to save or mitigate the problems. But then finally, uh, the 2 days after, the police released him, announced him that he was in police authority to detain him. And I could imagine that the police could work on this issue very quickly uh, if the case is related to somebody who criticized the government. Uh, on this issue, actually, uh, I was not surprised at all. So I can repeat. I was not surprised at all because uh, my research since 2015, especially when the several cases actually targeting activism. Since I did research in academic freedom. Many also scholars and also students were targeted, and without responsibility, who actually the uh, uh, who actually authority should be responsible in responding that cases. So here, I would say that because of uh, unclear law enforcement and also impunity process, and also without clear legal process to bring this to accountability process in justice, then it would bring wider problems in our law enforcement in Indonesia. Therefore, I could say that this case, I mean, Raffio Patra's case, it's around 2 or 3 months ago, actually just a repetitive from the previous cases, continuing cases. As I knew, the last year also it was really controversial. My friend Dandi Lesono, filmmaker, was also detained in the middle of night, and not many friends knowing this detention. But then he was released in the early morning after getting public pressure, including the I think friends in the surrounds the presidential palace also attending the attending to the police office. That's because of public pressure. And also targeting Robertus Robert. Robertus Robert is a lecturer from Jakarta who, after delivering speech in the front of presidential palace, he was also targeted by, of course, violence group. I've heard military also involved in that process, but the police also trying to what is that, to, in the name of safety, yeah, trying to protect him, but it's not a protecting process, but it's really like I'm afraid that that was really sort of like yeah, because without a professional or proper process in detaining person.
We have heard that in the normal process, a person can be detained without being produced before a magistrate or a judge for about 60 days initially. Is that correct?
Pardon me, produce what?
He can be kept under the police custody for
Yes.
Initially about 60 days before
60 days, okay.
Before they are produced before a magistrate or a judge.
Okay. Yeah. So indeed, there is a procedural in criminal process, yeah. That is correct, but I'm not certain with the how many days, yeah. But within, if I'm not mistaken, within 1 or 2 days should be clear what is status of detention person if the police kept him or detained him. So that's the initial process for that. And then if police can gather the information, collecting the evidence base, then it would bring to the magistrate or the court process.
Is there a time limit within which?
Yes. There is time limit, of course. There is time limit, and the police can also expand. Extend the time. But it should be informed, yeah, to the lawyer or to the family at least. So there is time limit, of course.
Now,
but the problem is sometimes just neglecting this if the case is related to the sensitive and controversial cases. Like in Papua, I haven't heard this is always in normal process, always beyond the time limit. Even how to see him, how to see the detention person, for instance, like friends from Papua, always difficulties to find him where actually he was detained, he or she was detained. So that's really, it depends the case, yeah. Because friends of Papua have been detained on the basis of traitors or makar. What is makar, Pak Kris? Traitor, yeah. It's sort of like attacking the country. So always like that. But it's not on the basis of procedural process as imposed by the Constitutional Court decision. While the Constitutional Court decision actually already put emphasize that should be careful in prosecuting on the basis of traitor if addressing the Papua or West Papua cases. So it depends of the context of case.
Now, you mentioned somewhere that the criminal procedure code, how does it mention about the time that person could be kept under detention?
Oh, I have to check the criminal procedure, yeah, because it's quite detailed. Criminal procedure for the normal process. It has also different to the what I call it's gross violation of human rights, because the time limit is different between the normal criminal procedure and the process of gross violation of human rights under the law of human rights court. So that's I have to check from the articles in the criminal procedure.
When you the change from the military regime after Suharto, how much of the law relating to arrest, detention, and things like that change in the new situation?
Yeah, talking about after Suharto, especially in the early years of after Suharto, authoritarian regime, it was initial process in changing the police, police reform, I mean. And also the police has, I think, collaboration with the numbers of universities in expanding the how to improve the performance of police, and even if I'm not mistaken, working together with the Norwegian Center of Human Rights, one of research center, human rights center in Oslo, in order to discuss how to bring the fair trial process during detention, including pre-trial detention, and also the change of law as a sign for police reform in the early years, early years after Suharto. And interestingly, when during Suharto's period, the military quite dominant in managing country, including the law enforcement. But then now it's really the police. It seems to me that it's stronger than military, even quite dominant in doing investigations, involving in many public authorities, and even now is like entering the political positions, strategic positions, like in anti-graft commission, or many state institutions actually occupied by the military police generals right now. So I would in the first 10 years after, or initial years after Suharto's step down, then there was a change, including the law, how to perform, and also establishing police commission in order to monitor the police and so on. It seems like democratic process in changing. But then now, I would say differently. The spirit of change has been changed because of quite dominant in politics. quite dominant in influencing the civil liberties. And I could not imagine just few days ago, the former police commander, uh, Tito Karnavian, he stated in the front of parliament member that Indonesia needs oligarch and autocracy in order to in order to manage pandemic effectively. So can you imagine the former police commander said like that? uh, it's clear message actually from him and also from this regime that the way to abuse of power, it seems like easily happen during pandemic. So if you see the difference between the early years, the change, the spirit of change, and then trying to make a performance, but then it's too dominant without control and too many entering the politics, and then now it's really dominant in Indonesia's politics. So
Now,
I could say like that in general.
you said that in the early years after Suharto, the police, there was more power given to police taken from the military. Now, in the early years, was there an attempt to strengthen the judiciary?
Yeah, that's good point. Why the spirit of change happened in the early years? Because of the euphoria during reformations era. Such euphoria also brought the message that dual function in politics, especially military, should be ended. And I could say in the first 5 years after Suharto stepped down, it seems like happening such process, reform in the military, especially stop the military intervention in the politics, because the end of dual function, and also stopping military in business. But then at the same time, this also brings the message, the policy reform, because the police become separate from the military forces. While in the past, actually part of military, ABRI, Angkatan Bersenjata Republik Indonesia. But after that, it's changed. Then it seems like going fast and changing in the police as an institution. But step by step, it's really the change is, it seems to me, becoming different path, yeah. Because since becoming another institution outside the military, then police has a stronger position, especially dealing with the public authorities, in dealing with the public order, and then involved in many public issues, either for law enforcement as well as part of the how to maintain the security order and so on. Then it would change. For instance, like now, I think only Tempo magazine. Tempo magazine is one of the critical magazine or media which still criticize the police are very deep, yeah, very sharp in looking at the business of police after the change. When the Tempo magazine released the series on rekening gendut, yeah, it's gendut, it means the fat person And also it's about the bank account. Bank account. It's quite difficult in English, but it's really like showing that the police has been collecting a lot of money for the wealth in the leadership of the police commanders. And then what happened after the series published? Then first Tempo got many attacks, and Anti-Graft Commission also one of the institutions that it was really strong position. I mean, Anti-Graft Commission, but at that time the police really targeted Anti-Graft Commission for sort of like rivalry, yeah, in law enforcement. And then so that's why I could not imagine two top leaders in Anti-Graft Commission can be detained by like the thief in the market or in the street. It seems like not respecting the state institution leaders during that time, and it was happened to Bambang Wijoyanto. Perhaps the person you may know him. Bambang Wijoyanto was the former chairperson of Yayasan Lembaga Bantuan Hukum, Indonesian Legal Aid Foundation. And then the case happened, and of course we criticize a lot on this issue because of the brave of KPK in unraveling the wealth of the police commanders at that time. And now what happened during since that time to present, step by step, the police, since the police also part of the Anti-Graft Commission as an investigator, but then in the leadership itself, in the leadership of Anti-Graft Commission, the police also now as a leader of Anti-Graft Commission. Can you imagine now? Many cases actually have been failed to bring to the justice because of that leadership. And again, for us, it is not surprising because last year I think there are several news media and also television already interview on this issue, and I gave also my speech that it would influence to the law enforcement, and then we could not expect more from the Anti-Graft Commission since the Anti-Graft Commission has been occupied by the police itself. So that's my points at the time.
Is it that after the military, the police became more powerful, and it's like a police state now rather than the police is in charge of affairs? How much of police can be controlled by the judiciary?
Judiciary, yeah, that's a good point. It's it's quite difficult, I could say like that. First, of course, the process in investigating, for instance, like what is that, pra-peradilan, the trial before the examining the content of examining the main what is Pak Kris Biantoro, pra-peradilan in English. I forgot the correct name. It's like the process, initial process. Pardon me? Sort of like initial process is more formal, not substantial. For instance, like if the police misuse during the detention, and then one case at that time when the Bambang Wijoyanto, the commissioner of Anti-Graft Commission, has been detained without proper process, and at that time also the case of Budi Gunawan, it's one of the top leader of the police. They use pre-trial process, initial process in examining the formal process in law enforcement. And then the judiciary, it seems like protecting the police. And then for me, it was a clear message that actually judiciary could not protect the fair trial. The first important point. Second, if we look at the case of Papua, actually a lot of misuse of power in doing law enforcement. But then what I could say about Papua, it's like a lot of discriminatory process. In the case of Surabaya, racism case, when the West Papuan student could bring evidence by bringing the video, it's clear message for the police, but then the police could not do anything. Just handling the case that it's really not the mastermind of the case. So it's really strong position, and then judiciary unfortunately could not do to limit their abuse of power. I could say this because of at least from these two cases. The first one is related to police versus Anti-Graft Commission, and the second one is related to Papua case. And then in the case of the Tempo reporting about the wealth of the police commanders, and also investigation or the investigation from the Anti-Graft Commission related to the corruption system also could not be limited. I mean, could not be examined with a good process. Yeah, because the police, it seems like protecting each other and using the state institutions as well. So that's my impression.
Correct to see police as being more powerful than the judiciary?
I'm not saying more powerful, yeah. In the case of police itself is part of judiciary process. Because judiciary process, initial judiciary process start from the police, all right? And then it seems like not stronger than judiciary because they are, the police can stop the case by himself, by themselves. So that's why the cases could not go to the judiciary. So except if any special or independent process without involving the police, then it will be possible to bring the case to the judiciary, and then what happened in the judiciary process, then I can compare. But since the police as part of judiciary process, then I could not compare because this is part of the process.
that is a very good point that you are raising. Now, usually the police function and the judicial function is quite clearly separated in many countries. At one point, the police function ends. Thereafter, the judiciary makes the decisions. Example, if a person is arrested, then as soon as possible, he should be produced before the judge. Then the judge takes over. And he is called to be in judicial custody. He's been protected by the judiciary. So whatever the police want to do thereafter depends on judge allowing them to do it according to the law. Otherwise, it's clearly separated. Judicial function and the police function is normally clearly separated. But from what you say, what I understand is that in Indonesia is not clearly separated.
Yeah, that's clear. Not separately processed, because part of that, although for instance, like the authority for tapping, for instance, should get approval from the court, but then it seems just a formal process, not really evaluating the real process. Yeah, just formal one. Why? Because especially since last year, when the cyber attacks a lot of happen in this country, and then why the police actually has authority to investigate more, to find who actually responsible for that cases, but then the police just stop really do not go further in investigating the cases, and then it's also create problematic for impunity in such attacks. Therefore, no judicial process then, because the police already stopped in the initial process.
Now, suppose a person is arrested.
Yeah.
Where will the lawyer go to his lawyer? Say the family retains a lawyer on behalf of the detained person. Then where has he to go to get him released? Say that the arrest is illegal. There's no reason to arrest. Please release him. Where has he to go?
Usually just to police, not to the court.
Yeah,
just to the police. That's clear. Why the police? It's quite problematic in that sense, because the lawyer just go to the police. Like I mentioned already, the case of Dandi Laksono, the case of Raffio Patra. The lawyers just go to the police, not to the police commission even, the institution that should supervise or to monitor, because the police commission now is like getting spokesperson of the police commanders. It seems to me like that. Please, Pak Kris Biantoro, correct me if I'm wrong. It's really like just normal in this country. If there is a problem of illegal detention, the lawyer will go to the police office instead of the court or in the superior body of the police.
So that must be leading to a lot of corruption.
Unsurprisingly, if it happened, because can you imagine the latest case of Joko Chandra? If you see in the headline news media in Indonesia, Joko Chandra really a big fish in the corruption, because he was really like masterminds in doing corruption in the many big projects in Indonesia could stay in Bali for 11 years with the guard by the protection of the police. And interestingly, the last the situation when this case was appeared, when the Joko Chandra as the bribery person, he could doing bribery to the police, not in the level of the lower level of the police, but it's really in generals top levels of the police commander. And then he could fly to the Kalimantan accompanied by that generals, and then flying to Malaysia accompanied by the prosecutors. So I would say that it's really parody in our legal law enforcement in Indonesia, because targeting the corruptors is really difficult, because the police as part of that and conflict of interest in managing cases. And why Indonesia need to establish anti-graft commission? Because the police actually, as you mentioned, as you observe, potentially abusive in doing corruption or doing improfessional without professional enforcement and so on. Therefore, establishing new institution, anti-graft commission, because this could be manipulated by the law enforcers.
So, is the in your civil society organizations, your movements, is there a demand increase the power of the judiciary to control arrest and detention and take it away from the police?
Yeah, I think I do not involve directly, but I know the discourse of this, because my university also has center. I'm also part of the Center of Anti-Corruption and Criminal Policy, and this is also one of the reform agenda that we really need to address, especially targeting the law enforcement, because what I mentioned actually more big cases, instead of small cases, like in not really small, but I would say it's not really famous or in the news media. For instance, like small farmers who defend himself because of agrarian conflict. I also managed within this year, it's already 4 or 5 cases. Small farmers were detained without proper enforcement. And therefore, we also propose the process in making fair trial, transparent, and also accountable for those law enforcement, especially for pre-trial detention. We have law, we have criminal procedure, but then we still have a problem with those law, and also more seriously law enforcement, because this law enforcement process actually could not be accountable properly, since no authority to monitor or to evaluate this, because such evaluation actually absent in this country. And the role of judiciary actually should be strengthened, including the prosecutors. But as you know, perhaps the prosecutors also has another serious problem in this country, because many reasons. They I think the prosecutor's office actually in the terms of budget, it's quite far different with the police. they they have a small budget. This is based on my friend's research for his dissertation. Small budget, influenced by the military culture, and they also survive with targeted cases as part of evaluation for his or her career in that institutions, and why they also easily involved in corruption because of small income for prosecutors. Therefore, it's like what I call is, if you have a problem with the criminal process, then first you will enter the tiger kandang macan. I call it a tiger what is Pak Griasmonter? Tiger horse. And then after you finish with dealing with tigers, then you will go to the crocodile place. Then it will be double process in criminal procedure that before entering the court justice system.
So it's really the things are decided outside the court system most of the time.
Pardon me?
Normally, the things are decided outside the court system rather than through the courts.
Yes, yes, yes. The only possible for evaluating process if there is misuse during the detention or during the pre-trial detention, I mean, is initial process, what I call is pre-trial process. In bahasa Indonesia is pra-peradilan, pre-trial process or initial process before entering examining the content, examining the substantial criminal issues. Yeah, so it's more formal. The only possible to challenge that mechanism.
I see. Is the government, does the government have any plans to curtail the power of the judiciary and strengthen the power of the courts?
It's political agenda.
Yeah.
Rather than the legal reform agenda, it's more political agenda. You know, the power of police is really strong right now, and Minister of Interiors, as I mentioned, as a former commander of police, Tito Karnavian, for instance, like this, in the initial process of pandemic, how the country managing the pandemic, when the president told the public that we will declare the emergency status if, according to the president Jokowi, if needed, then it can be like civil emergencies. So quite surprising when Jokowi telling us about civil emergency. It means that the involvement of police and military, because the law actually as a legacy of Dutch colonial law still exists till present. But then public, including me, criticized the Jokowi statement, and then the spokesperson trying to correct or to giving rationalization of Jokowi's statement. But then the spokesperson, presidential spokesperson, told to the public that actually no, the government did not want to go to the civil emergencies. Why? Because this is only the last resort, according to spokesperson Fajrul Rahman at that time. But then the police commander, when he was invited by parliament, told to the parliament member, no, we really expect this is civil liberties, civil emergencies, and we can discipline civil liberties, and by releasing two letters that really destroying the criminal procedure. What I call destroying, because many articles under criminal code actually has been repealed or annulled by constitutional court, but then activated by the police through letters in order to, for instance, like addressing criticism against the government. So that's really abuse of power. But unfortunately, the president of Jokowi just keep quiet to those facts without any political process in, for instance, like making correction to that statement or making reform agenda to the police. So that's why if you ask me about that case, about that issues, to what extent the government intervene this in order to change, then it would be more political agenda instead of legal.
So is it that the government feel that that is too big a task for them? That police are so powerful that they interfere is politically unwise?
I would say that perhaps theoretically, we could say the government failed in doing police reform agenda. But then if you look at the context, I would say differently. Whether the government changed to reform, or the government itself actually create intentionally using such forces, police forces, in doing that. So I would prefer the second points of view instead of theoretically in looking at the criminal justice system. Why? Because under Jokowi's presidential administration, the relation between the regime and the police, I mean the relation between the presidential palace and the police, it seems like making a stronger position in protecting oligarchs in business and entering the politics too excessive, yeah, entering the politics, and even sort of like they have own agenda locked in reform. Therefore, it's quite difficult for us to see the change during the Jokowi's administration. Therefore, in 2018, I already mentioned in the paper that we are entering the authoritarianism style of government, neo-authoritarianism style of government. So I wrote that article before Thomas Power from Australia or Tim Lindsay from Melbourne University wrote about that. Why? Because I consider cases in the ground, especially looking at targeting free expressions issues, human rights defenders, academic freedom, and also press freedom. From 4 cases, I could conclude that now we are turned to the authoritarianism model at ground.
Did you write that article in English or?
Unfortunately, in Bahasa Indonesia, but now almost done, almost finished, because I'm trying to finish article free expression and authoritarianism in Indonesia, together with Melissa Crouch from New South Wales University, and then it will be in English. I will let you know if it published already. Now it's still process, almost finished, nearly done.
Okay, that's very good. The so the likelihood of improving the judicial role in the control of detentions and related matters, arrest, detention, and things like that, is remote. And in fact, it will be controlled by the police.
Yeah, still long way to go to that interest. I think it's long way to go, because I'm pretty sure that police will keep these situations, and they do not want to change as long as Jokowi as president. This is my argument on the basis of experience in last five years in doing research, because it's quite difficult to deal with this, because they already intervene in many politics arena, and including, for instance, like a clear message rivalry between police and anti-graft commission. It's clear enough that the police would, do not want to change by themselves, and he also supported by the police. One important signs why the police has a stronger position within a year, when the government approved the parliament proposals for revising anti-graft commission law, and it's become clear that they do not want to change. I mean, the police position, and even many legal ethics issues happen, but the government just keep quiet on this issue. So the pass or the enactment of new revision of the law, anti-graft commission law, actually at the same time, I could say that this is a clear message where the government addressed these issues, especially law enforcement, and also reflecting the government positions for policy reform agenda.
What is the role of the Constitutional Court? Can you explain a little?
Constitutional Court, on the basis of Constitution, has 4 authorities. The first one is dealing with examining the legislation if contravene to the Constitution. The second is related to the impeachment, giving opinion for the impeachment process. The third is dissolving political parties. The fourth is related to settling conflicts among state institutions. For instance, like if a financial state agency conflict with the anti-graft commission, then it will go to the Constitutional Court. So only 4.
So possibility of citizen or a citizens organization going before the Constitutional Court on an issue like, for example, the matters relating to detention.
No.
Is it possible?
No, not possible. We call it constitutional complaint. Is that right? Constitutional complaint. We have no authority. I mean, the Constitutional Court has no authority for constitutional complaint. We knew this authority happen in Germany, in South Korea, but not in Indonesia. We already challenged in the case of Ahmadiyya case, religious minority groups trying to use this as part of constitutional complaint, but it was rejected. And then we have no, we have no change. I mean, the Constitutional Court still have only 4 on the basis of constitutional constitution. On the basis of constitution, only 4 authorities. No constitutional complaint could be brought by citizen if any issues on this issue. So that's why what I mentioned previously, the only possible to bring this case, I mean pre-trial detention, only pre-trial process in the court, yeah, initial process in the court, pra-peradilan, we call it sidang pra-peradilan, pre-trial process. So that's the only possible, and only one judge to examine this.
And how long after the detention does the pre-trial process begin? Say if a person is arrested today.
It can be, well, it can be quick. Only 2 weeks can be happen. It depends, yeah. This is also an issue, Basil. I have experience. It's very unique at that time. Just recently, a few months ago, when I tried to help citizen in Tuban, three citizens actually were detained by the police, and then I supported them for bringing this to pre-trial process. And then what happened? Together with Legal Aid Foundation, coming to the court process from Surabaya, it's around 2 hours by car. Before we arrive, actually, the court just released him, released them without proper process, without lawyers, without any any legal process, clear legal process. Then it's, for us, this is like a parody, yeah, in legal enforcement. Can you imagine? The pre-trial process can be only 1 day. But on the other hand, if pre-trial process, which has been brought by, for instance, like Budi Gunawan, special commanders in the police, it can be like a very democratic process, a long process, and it could invite many parties in examining the case, including inviting the experts from universities to give testimony and so on. And yes, we have a time limitation for that. It can be quick process, but then sometimes it can be quicker or even without proper process. So law in action could be far different to the text.
Regarding your Supreme Court, what is its functions?
The Supreme Court has authority, of course, examining the case in the level of cassation. We call it cassation. Yeah, it's the last resort for examining the case. Yeah.
Abuse.
And then the
other. Do they have a role with regard to human rights? Say, for example, if there's an illegal detention, very unjustified, can you go to the Supreme Court and complain?
No, that's only examining legal cases in the cassation level, and the second one, judicial review. No authority to examining the case of, for instance, like illegal detention and so on.
Now, regarding judicial review, if a law is being passed by the your parliament, if it is thought to be wrong, can citizens go and petition Supreme Court
Yeah.
for judicial review?
We have two routes for judicial review. The first goes to Constitutional Court if the law at level legislations contravene to the Constitution. But then if regulation contravene to legislation, then it will go to Supreme Court. So it depends of the law. For instance, like a government regulation, it will go to the Supreme Court. But if the law act, it will go to the Constitutional Court. Police letters, we can review to the Supreme Court. But then, as you perhaps knew about this, bringing to the judicial process is also an easy process. Quite complicated. It might be taking quite a long process, spending a lot of time and energy, of course, and also we have to bring these cases to Jakarta. And then what happened if the case in far away from the capital? Then it will be more complicated for that.
So, regarding directly on the fundamental rights, no court has jurisdiction.
The jurisdiction for Supreme Court has to
violations of fundamental rights, human rights.
Yeah. This is also absence in our legal system about human rights protection, because under human rights law, there is no special mechanism for bringing this case to the court, except reporting to National Human Rights Commission. We have several state auxiliary bodies in Indonesia, for instance, like ombudsman, but its limits to maladministration process, not human rights violation. We have also Commission of Information, dealing with, of course, right to information. But then it's also very limited because dealing with a very complicated process to get documents openly after trial process. And interestingly, the result of Commission of Information can be disputed to the trial process under administrative court process, and it will go to 2 levels, can be to higher court and then finally to Supreme Court. So it's really complicated. And then we have also the problem of, for instance, like victim and witness protection. We can go to the special agency for victim and witness protection. But then it's also limited because the budget, because the authorities, and so on. So no specific issues are dealing with constitutional complaint. In general, I would say like that. No specific mechanism for human rights abuses, except if any gross violation of human rights, crimes against humanity, and genocide. We can bring this case to Human Rights Court. So Human Rights Court actually has also limited authorities, only dealing with these 2 issues: criminal against humanity, crimes against humanity, and also genocide. But theoretically, in practice, also far different, because now I'm dealing with 7 human rights cases. Actually, just sort of like impunity system under our legal, our law enforcement, since the National Human Rights Commission, because not the police, National Human Rights Commission send the case to the prosecutors, but then prosecutors send to the National Human Rights Commission, like a table tennis ball. And it spent already more than 10 years for that cases, and without clear until present. And then finally, the chief of prosecutor said that no human rights violations. And then again, impunity process. So back to your questions, if any human rights violation, actually there are several routes, more very specific, with limited authorities, no special mechanism to bring this human rights abusive to the constitutional mechanism.
So if there is an illegal arrest or a detention, is it possible to complain to the National Human Rights Commission? What can the National Human Rights Commission do?
Yeah, of course, you can bring that. I mean, the citizen can bring this complaint to the National Human Rights Commission, and also citizen can bring also to the Police Commission, or even to Ombudsman. Yeah, because this is also maladministration, all right. But then what the National Human Rights Commission can do, the final result for National Human Rights Commission actually just releasing the recommendation for other institutions. So National Human Rights Commission gave recommendation to the police. If the National Human Rights Commission consider need to investigate further, then the National Human Rights Commission can investigate at ground what happened. But then the final result still just recommendation.
And nobody is under obligation to respect the recommendation.
Yeah, that is the problem of National Human Rights Commission institutions. If you see the mandate of National Human Rights institution, actually quite limited and weak. Yeah, he can. I mean, National Human Rights institutions could bring the message to the politics, for instance, to the president, to the parliament. But then it depends if the policies, if the president, for instance, like listen what the National Human Rights Commission said about the problem with the police, then the president will do something. For instance, like asking the police commander to come to the palace. But then again, it depends the politics of palace. Yeah, what will be happen? Then it depends of the president. Nothing special process for National Human Rights Commission. They just give recommendation.
How is your media? Is your media taking up the issue of the need to bring the police power under control regarding arrest and detention? Is there a opinion making?
Yeah. Actually, there are several good medias, national, especially national medias, which could take up these issues. on the basis of daily cases or institutional cases. And even media also sometimes quite effective in providing complete information by checking uh, uh, information to the authority. Their role is really significant for public understanding in explaining the case. But then again, media just publishing, yeah, or providing information. The decision still left in the political institutions or state institutions. Uh, as long as they do not attack media, then it will be safe. No constraints actually for that. But then now we could learn from the several cases at ground, especially dealing with the police cases. As I mentioned actually previously, when the police versus anti-graft commission, the Tempo, one of the journalism, quite often been attacked by unclear actors, yeah. Police supposed to investigate the actors, but then always fail to unravel the case. But then here, I would say that media has a challenge, seriously, easily attacked by uncertain actors when the impunity system also happen. And then it's getting worse when in the era of digital technology, since media also has sort of like provide multiple platform in providing news by using, for instance, like digital technologies. It it also uh, uh, it also growing situation attacking media by cyber attacks, and we can see from last 2 weeks cases, Tirto and Tempo, again Tempo magazine, were attacked by unclear actors because the website of Tempo magazine were, I don't know what is in English. It's like pertasan, hijack by somebody else, changing the website and provoking something in the website. So that's also new model attacks in our media now. In general, I would say that within 5 years, last 5 years, the press freedom situation also declining. The protection for press freedom is also declining. Why I could say this? Because of my PhD dissertation is also related to the press freedom, and so that's why I work closely with journalists in this issue, and also I involved with the Journalist Association as part of ethic board members. And I found many really serious cases. If we look at the serious cases, actually Papua is the most dangerous area for journalism in providing news, in producing information. So I still put Papua is the most dangerous or serious for journalists in providing news, reliable news.
Has the government, increased its pressure against the media?
There are several answers. Yeah. First, the owner of media is also politician. So can you imagine the role of politician in intervening the editorial rooms in providing news? The second, actually, media itself as part of oligarch, not all, yeah, not all media, just few mainstream medias. And then the government itself actually, although repeatedly say that promoting and protecting press freedom, but then many attacks to medias could not be resolved. I mean, impunity system still take place for media or journalists who serve as a journalism at ground. And then why this become complex situations? Because the police is the actually front line for investigating the cases. But then, as you know, that the police also involved in this violence, either directly or omitting or just violating by omission without proper investigation, for instance. So I in my dissertation, and also continue to my research on press freedom, actually there are two the most serious or dangerous cases for journalism in reporting the case. The first one is anti-corruption issues. It's very dangerous, very risky for journalists. And many journalists had been kidnapped, killed, extrajudicial killing, I think, like in Ardian Samad Rais in Papua, Merauke, and I forgot the second point. The first one is about the extrajudicial, yeah, the issue of anti-corruption, and the second one is about reporting natural resources exploitation excessively. So there are two cases very dangerous for journalists to report. The first one is anti-corruption. The second one is reporting about natural resources exploitation excessively. So many journalists actually were targeted because of these two cases. And of course, related to the Papua, if I'm asked, how about the Papua? Yeah, not so many cases in Papua, because the situation itself is already dangerous, or the situation itself is already restricted for foreign journalists, for even those domestic journalists who provide investigative journalism, quite difficult because the military always intervene in that process, or police always intervene in indirectly or directly in providing information in that case. So that's the thing, what I could say in general, talking about the role of government in relation to the media. But pretty sure for the last 5 years declining press freedom in Indonesia. Not only press freedom, this is parallel with freedom of expressions, academic freedom, and also the declining for the protection of human rights defenders.
Now, if you were asked, what would be your recommendations for, ending illegal arrest and detentions in your country? What would you say?
That's good point. Yeah, I never thought about this recommendation. I know the Minister of the Coordinator Minister of Law and Justice, actually friends of mine, Professor Mahfud MD. He was also the one who gave me a word, yeah, Muhammad Yamin Award is about the constitutional system. We are at the same group for constitutional law system lecturers group. But then, although we have a connection, yeah, it's not difficult actually to talk with each other, I and him. But then, dealing with pre-trial detention is another issue, because it should go to the parliament. It should go to the process of making to change legally, yeah, from the law perspective, and also law enforcement institutionally. And your question making me difficult because recommendation is I would prefer, if any chance to do, actually involving the civil society in making criminal procedure legal reform more open and also participatory process. By involving the civil society in lawmaking, it will make a clear process or clear direction for change. But then again, it's quite cross-stated if you ask me about the change, because we could not predict what happened in this country right now, at least during Jokowi's administration. Just recently, last week, the law of constitutional court can be amended within a week without public knowing about the process. Can you imagine? And now is Prosecutors Act, the law related to the prosecutors, our Attorney General, now is going to be reviewed or amended as well without public knowing about that process. And I'm afraid that the police law or the police act will be changed also suddenly without public knowing. And so that's why my recommendation would be participatory process in lawmaking will be a very important for bringing the message of democratizing policy reform institutionally. And hopefully it will bring also the message of criminal integrated justice system.
Okay, I think
it's not really precise, yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be a good thing for the people like you and who are playing an important role to address the issue of some nitty-gritty changes, small changes that can strengthen the rights of the detainee and strengthen the role of the judiciary as against the police.
Yeah. And I just remember, in Indonesia, there are two special programs actually outside the higher education for the police academy. So we have police academy in Jakarta, but outside the police academy, there are two universities. First is in Jakarta, University of Indonesia, and the second one is my university. And I also the lecturer for human rights for the police in we call it master program for the police studies. So from that program, actually, I could do something more, but it's more to change the perspective, paradigm, and how to improve the law enforcement. Yeah, but then the roots of the problem still political, and then since I have possible communication with that program and also dealing with police as well, I invite, for instance, like international organizations, perhaps your organizations, or the other is like Norwegian Center for Human Rights. Norwegian Center for Human Rights has been working closely with the police academy and also the policymaker in the law and justice minister in order to change this. Quite aware with this issue, pre-trial detention is really problematic in Indonesia. So that's why step by step we campaign this as part of the change. Perhaps this also effective in changing the situation in this country.
Okay, so we made a good beginning. Maybe we can, later follow this up with each of the issues we can take separately in more detail, so that internationally you can create some education about what is really the problems facing the democracy and the rule of law in your own country, and particularly in relation to protection people who are under illegal arrest or detention or denied of fair trial, and also regarding the media freedom. It appears that some things are going on in your country, but all these things are not known outside, except for very specialized the special people who have connection to Indonesia. So, so we could discuss in more detail in one by one. For example, the evolution of the power of the police.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. It has been a very good discussion. And
you're welcome.
Yeah, I will discuss with Chris as what to do with it.
Yeah. Pak Chris is expert than me.
Yeah.
He already knew about what I mentioned to you. He's very humble to say.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much also, Pak Basil, and I hope you still keep healthy and put attention on this issue. I think it's very important for police reform in Indonesia.
Okay. These days,
perhaps we can also expand collaboration, in the future. For instance, like if any special session in the police, I will ask you perhaps, or Pak Chris, to give lecture, a special lecture from Hong Kong or from Jakarta.
Yeah, sure. We will be very happy to do that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Oke,
Oke.
oke, thank you very much. Ya, ya, Pak Kris, terima kasih.
Oke. Chris?